Have you ever wondered why some people seem unshakable, calm, and deeply respected? Not because they do everything, but because they refuse most things. What if the real strength of the mind is not in saying yes to opportunities, obligations, or demands, but in having the courage to say no? Imagine living in a world filled with noise, pressure, and constant invitations to compromise, yet remaining steady, free, and untangled. This was the secret discipline of Socrates. He didn't chase every path, he didn't bend to every voice, and he didn't surrender to the expectations of others. Instead, he mastered the rare art of refusal, the discipline of no. And within that simple act lies one of the greatest lessons in philosophy, one that can transform how we live, decide, and protect our peace today. Socrates valued self-mastery above all else, and this truth remains as relevant today as it was in the streets of ancient Athens. To him, wisdom was not just about clever arguments or winning debates, it was about living a life aligned with truth, with reason, and with integrity. And integrity begins with the courage to say no, not only to others, but to impulses, to temptations, to distractions, and even to the parts of ourselves that lead us astray. Saying no, for Socrates, was not about pushing people away or shutting down opportunities. It was about preserving the wholeness of the self, ensuring that what we gave our energy to was in harmony with what truly mattered. In his time, Socrates was often misunderstood because he lived differently than the crowd. While many Athenians sought wealth, power, or recognition, he lived simply, almost stubbornly so. He walked barefoot, owned little, and refused to take payment for his teaching. When people questioned him, why not live like others? Why not gather riches or fame? He showed them by example that these things were not necessary for a meaningful life. By saying no to the temptations of status and comfort, he preserved his freedom. That, for him, was the truest wealth: mastery over himself, not mastery over others. Think of the world we live in now. How often do we find ourselves saying yes just to avoid discomfort? Yes to invitations when we are exhausted, yes to extra work when we know it will burn us out. Yes to habits that drain our energy, simply because it feels easier than saying no. We do it out of fear of disappointing others, fear of missing out, fear of standing apart. But in those moments we give away a piece of our freedom. We surrender self-mastery to the opinions of others. Socrates would remind us that such a life, dictated by the demands of the crowd, is no life at all. He famously declared that the unexamined life is not worth living. At its core, this means you must pause and question why you do what you do. Are you living from your own values, or are you pulled in every direction by the desires of those around you? When you agree to everything without reflection, you stop examining. You live reactively, not consciously, and when that happens, you may achieve much, but little of it will belong to you. Self-mastery begins when you reclaim the power of choice, when you are brave enough to say no to what is not aligned with your deeper truth. But let's be clear, Socrates' no was not harsh or selfish. He was not a man who isolated himself or rejected others out of pride. In fact, he spent his life engaging people in dialogue, challenging them to think deeper, to see clearer. His no was an act of care, both for himself and for those he taught. By refusing to play the games of wealth or power, he held up a mirror to society. He showed that you could live differently, that you could seek virtue instead of vanity, truth instead of applause. And that is the discipline of no. It is a refusal to betray yourself for the comfort of others. Consider for a moment how powerful it is to be someone who does not bend to every demand, who does not seek approval in every eye. Such a person is unshakable. Their peace does not depend on whether they are liked, whether they are invited, whether they are praised. Their peace comes from within, from the knowledge that they are living in harmony with their own values. This is the kind of strength Socrates cultivated. He said no to people pleasing because he knew that pleasing others often means betraying yourself. And what good is applause if, in winning it, you lose yourself? This lesson is timeless. In our own lives, people-pleasing is one of the quietest forms of slavery. It ties us to the expectations of others and leaves us restless, exhausted, and resentful. We overextend ourselves, thinking it will bring peace. But peace never comes that way. Socrates teaches us that peace comes only when your yes and your no are aligned with truth. When you say yes to what matters and no to what doesn't, your life regains order. Imagine a river. When it flows freely, it is strong and clear. But if you keep building small channels, letting the water leak in every direction, soon the river loses its strength. It becomes shallow, scattered, powerless. Our lives are the same. Each unnecessary yes is another channel that drains our energy. Self-mastery requires building boundaries, saying no where no is needed, so that your energy flows strong, focused, and true. Socrates modeled this by living a life of simplicity and discipline. He did not chase after everything. He selected carefully what he gave himself to, and in that selection, he found freedom. To live with such discipline requires courage, because the world will not always understand. People may call you selfish, strange, or stubborn. But Socrates' life reminds us that greatness is not found in being like everyone else, it is found in being true to what is right. And here is the paradox: when you stop people-pleasing, when you dare to say no, you become more valuable to others. Why? Because your yes finally means something. When Socrates spoke, people listened, because his words carried the weight of truth. He had not diluted himself with endless compromise. He had the strength to refuse, and so when he gave, it was genuine, it was powerful, it was rare. Saying no, then, is not rejection, it is preservation. It is an affirmation of your dignity, your values, your purpose. It is the discipline of choosing what to give your life to, instead of letting the crowd decide for you. Socrates understood that a life wasted on the demands of others is no life at all. Self-mastery is the art of living intentionally, and the first step to intentional living is the art of saying no. Most people live their lives trying to please others. They say yes to every request, every demand, every expectation, even when deep inside their heart says no. Why? Because they fear disapproval, they fear rejection. They fear being seen as selfish or unkind. And yet, if you look at the lives of history's greatest thinkers, you will notice something profound. They did not live to please everyone. They lived according to principle, according to truth, and above all, according to self-mastery. Socrates, perhaps the most famous philosopher of ancient Greece, is the clearest example of this. He lived in a society that valued honor, reputation, and conformity, but he refused to bend his soul for the approval of others. He believed that self-mastery, knowing and disciplining your own mind, was far more valuable than pleasing the crowd. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." What does that mean? It means if you spend your life blindly doing what others expect of you, without asking whether it aligns with truth, virtue, or your own deepest values, then you are not truly living. You are just performing. You are wearing a mask. This is why Socrates valued self-mastery over people-pleasing. To him, the true battle was not against enemies outside, but against the weakness within. The weakness that tempts us to say yes when we should say no. The weakness that makes us chase approval instead of wisdom. The weakness that allows us to betray ourselves in exchange for temporary acceptance. Think about it. Every time you say yes to something that goes against your principles, you surrender a piece of yourself. You compromise. You give away your freedom to someone else's desires. But every time you choose self-mastery, every time you pause, reflect, and act according to your own examined judgment, you grow stronger. You gain respect not from the crowd, but from your own soul. And in the end, that is the respect that matters most. Socrates himself lived this discipline in the most extreme way. When he was put on trial in Athens, accused of corrupting the youth and challenging the gods of the city, he could have easily saved his life. All he had to do was flatter the jury. He could have begged for forgiveness. He could have promised to stop questioning the leaders, to stop stirring up debate, to stop making people uncomfortable with truth. In other words, he could have chosen people-pleasing. But Socrates refused. He said, "I shall obey the god rather than you." He chose self-mastery. He chose principle. He chose truth, even if it cost him everything. And it did cost him everything. Socrates drank the poison. He accepted death, because compromising his values was worse than dying. Now pause for a moment and imagine that. Imagine believing so strongly in the importance of discipline, in the importance of truth, that you would rather lose your life than lose your integrity. That is the ultimate form of saying no. No to fear. No to compromise. No to people pleasing. But this is not just history, it is a lesson for our own time. Look at the world we live in today. We are constantly pressured to say yes to our boss, to our friends, to society, to the endless stream of messages on our screens. We are pressured to conform, to agree, to go along with whatever the crowd is doing. If you spend all your time trying to please everyone, you will never have time to master yourself. And that's the paradox. People respect you more when you stand firm. They may not like it at first, but they admire strength, they admire clarity. They admire the one who can say no. Because deep down, everyone wishes they had that courage. Socrates reminds us that discipline begins inside. Self-mastery is about asking, why am I doing this? Am I acting from fear of rejection or from clarity of truth? Am I saying yes because I truly believe in this, or because I don't want to upset someone else? When you develop this kind of inner discipline, you stop being a slave to approval. You no longer need everyone to agree with you. You no longer panic when someone is disappointed. You realize that their approval is not the foundation of your worth. Your worth comes from your integrity, from your choices, from your courage to live by examined principles. And let us be honest, people, pleasing never works anyway. No matter how much you sacrifice, no matter how much you bend, you will never make everyone happy. And in the process, you lose yourself. You become like a ship without a captain, drifting wherever the waves of opinion take you. Socrates refused to drift, he steered his own soul. That is why, even though he died more than 2,000 years ago, we are still talking about him today. His courage outlived the opinions of his accusers. His discipline outlived the crowd that condemned him. That is the power of self-mastery over people-pleasing. So what does this mean for you? It means the next time you are asked to do something, pause. Ask yourself, does this align with my values? Does this strengthen me or weaken me? Am I saying yes because it's right, or because I'm afraid to say no? If the answer is fear, then you already know what Socrates would advise. He would say, have the discipline to choose self-mastery. Have the discipline to live by principle, not by approval. Because in the end, the unexamined yes is a trap, but the examined no is a key to freedom, to clarity, and to the kind of strength that no crowd can ever take away. Every choice you make in life has a cost. Most of the time, we don't see it clearly because the cost is hidden. But the truth is this: whenever you say yes to something, you are also saying no to something else. And most often, that hidden no is to yourself. Think about your daily life. How many times have you agreed to help someone even when you were exhausted? How many times have you gone along with plans you didn't want, simply because you didn't want to upset someone? How many times have you filled your calendar with commitments, leaving no time for rest, reflection, or your own growth? Each of those yeses was, in reality, a no to your health, your peace, your progress. Socrates understood this trade-off deeply. He believed that wisdom was not just about knowing many things, but about knowing the right things. To live wisely meant recognizing that time, energy, and attention are limited. If you spend them on what is trivial, you rob yourself of what is essential. When you say yes without reflection, you give away the most precious resources you have, and you give them to things that may not matter tomorrow. But when you learn the discipline of saying no, you begin to honor yourself. You begin to protect your inner space so you can invest in what truly matters. Let's look at it another way. Imagine you have a garden with only a small patch of fertile soil. You cannot grow everything there. If you plant weeds, there will be no space for fruit. If you fill it with shallow plants, the deep roots of trees will never have a chance. Life is exactly like that garden. Every yes you give is like planting a seed, but if you keep planting seeds for everyone else, your own harvest never grows. This is why every yes carries a hidden no. When you say yes to gossip, you say no to wisdom. When you say yes to overwork, you say no to rest. When you say yes to shallow approval, you say no to deep fulfillment. And when you say yes to pleasing everyone else, you say no to being true to yourself. Socrates, in his simple way of living, embodied this principle. He said no to wealth though it was available. He said no to luxury though others pursued it. He said no to comfort though it was tempting. Why? Because each of those yeses would have been a no to philosophy, to truth, to his mission of questioning and awakening the people of Athens. His discipline to say no gave him the freedom to say yes to what mattered most. And you can see the same truth in modern life. The people who achieve mastery, whether in art, science, leadership, or even inner peace, are not the ones who said yes to everything. They are the ones who had the courage to say no. No to distractions, no to noise, no to the countless little things that steal time away from greatness. But here is the challenge: saying no feels uncomfortable. It feels selfish. We are taught from a young age to be agreeable, to avoid conflict, to make others happy, and so we say yes even when it tears us apart inside. Yet discipline begins with honesty. And honesty says, if I say yes to everything, I will lose myself. I will drown in commitments. I will betray the deeper yes that my soul is longing for. The yes to purpose, to growth, to peace. The next time you are about to agree to something, pause. Ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? It might surprise you. You might realize that the price is too high. That saying yes to another late night of work is a no to your health. That saying yes to endless scrolling is a no to clarity of mind. That saying yes to shallow approval is a no to the deeper path of wisdom. Socrates would remind us that life is too short to waste on thoughtless yeses. Every decision shapes the soul. Every choice is a step toward or away from who you are meant to be. And here is the paradox. When you learn to say no to what weakens you, you gain the freedom to say a deeper yes. A yes to clarity. A yes to strength. A yes to living a life that is truly examined. That examined yes has power. It has depth, it has meaning. So remember this: every yes is not free. It carries with it a hidden no. And if you do not choose carefully, the no will always fall on you. The world will take your time, your energy, your peace, and it will not give them back. Only you can protect them. Only you can decide that your deepest yes to growth, to wisdom, to inner freedom comes first. And that is the essence of Socratic discipline. To live with the courage to say no, not because you reject others, but because you refuse to reject yourself. We often think of freedom as doing whatever we want, whenever we want, without limits. But that kind of freedom is an illusion. It is chaos. It is like a river without banks. Water spilling everywhere, directionless, powerless. Real freedom is not the absence of limits. Real freedom is the presence of strong boundaries. Socrates understood this better than most. To him, discipline was the foundation of a meaningful life. A person without boundaries, he believed, was not truly free. They were a slave to impulses, to desires, to the endless demands of others. But a person who set boundaries, who could say no, who could guard their time and their soul, that person was free. Let's pause and reflect on this idea. Why do boundaries give us freedom? Because they protect what is essential. They create space for us to think, to grow, to live deliberately. Without boundaries, everyone else writes our schedule, shapes our energy, and decides our path. But with boundaries, we become the authors of our own lives. Think of a musician. If you hand someone an instrument and tell them to play freely, without any rules, what happens? They make noise, random sounds, nothing meaningful. But if that same musician learns discipline, notes, scales, rhythm, structure, suddenly freedom emerges. Within the boundaries of music, they can create beauty. The same is true for the soul. Boundaries are the structure that makes freedom possible. In daily life, boundaries may look simple: turning off your phone at night, saying no to toxic conversations, choosing not to overcommit, refusing to be pulled into endless comparison. But each small act of boundary setting is a declaration: my life has value. My time has meaning. My peace matters. And from that declaration, freedom grows. Socrates himself lived with profound boundaries. He chose not to chase wealth, though Athens was full of people doing so. He chose not to seek political power, though he had the influence. He chose not to indulge in endless comforts, though they were available. His boundaries were firm because he knew that every indulgence comes with a cost to clarity, to purpose, to self-mastery. By limiting what he allowed into his life, Socrates expanded the space for philosophy, for wisdom, for teaching. His boundaries gave him freedom to focus on what truly mattered. And that is the great paradox: boundaries do not trap you. They liberate you. They take away the noise so that you can hear your own voice. Now think about our world today. Everywhere you look, people are exhausted, burned out, pulled in 1,000 directions. Why? Because they have no boundaries. They say yes to every request. They keep their phones always on. They let the demands of work bleed into family time, and the noise of social media invade their inner peace. They think they are free because they can choose anything at any time. But in reality, they are trapped. Trapped by a lack of discipline. Trapped by endless yeses. Trapped by their own inability to set limits. True inner freedom begins the moment you draw a line and say, "This is where I stop. This is where I protect myself." It could be as simple as refusing to check email after a certain hour. It could be declining an invitation that drains you. It could be refusing to argue about things that do not matter. Each of these is a boundary. Each of these is a wall that keeps chaos out and lets peace in. And here is the deeper truth: boundaries are not only for the outside world, they are also for the inner world. Self-mastery requires setting limits with your own desires. Socrates taught that if you cannot govern yourself, you will be governed by others. If you cannot discipline your impulses, you will be enslaved by them. Think about food, for example. If you have no boundaries, you eat endlessly, you indulge every craving, and at first it feels like freedom. But eventually, your health declines, your energy disappears, and you realize you are not free at all. You are imprisoned by appetite. The same is true for anger, for pleasure, for distraction. Boundaries with the self are the highest form of discipline. They keep the soul clear, strong, and free. This is why boundaries are not selfish, they are sacred. They are a way of honoring life. By saying no to what weakens you, you create space to say yes to what strengthens you. By guarding your energy, you can give it more fully to the things and people who matter. Without boundaries, even love becomes diluted, because you are too scattered to give yourself fully. But with boundaries, love becomes deeper, because it is chosen, deliberate, and whole. Socrates himself showed this in the way he engaged with people. He spoke only when conversations sought truth. He did not flatter or manipulate. His words had weight because they were not wasted. His boundaries gave power to his speech, to his silence, and even to his death. That is why, centuries later, his name still carries authority. And so, the lesson is clear. If you want true freedom, you must build boundaries. Boundaries with the world, so you are not consumed by endless demands. Boundaries with yourself, so you are not enslaved by your own impulses, and boundaries with time, so you can focus not on everything, but on what is essential. Ask yourself, where in my life do I need stronger boundaries? Where am I saying yes when I should say no? Where am I letting noise enter my mind, when I should protect my peace? Each answer to these questions is an invitation to freedom. The strength of boundaries is not about pushing people away. It is about creating the conditions where your soul can breathe, your mind can grow, and your life can align with what truly matters. That is not restriction. That is liberation. And as Socrates showed us, the person who lives with discipline, the person who guards their life with strong boundaries, is the only person who is truly free. Every time you say no, you reveal something about yourself. A no is never empty. It is a mirror of what you value most. To the untrained eye, no might look like rejection, denial, or even selfishness. But if you look deeper, you will see that no is actually a declaration of priorities. It says, this matters to me, and that does not. Socrates understood this principle well. He believed that choices were not neutral. Every decision shaped the soul. And so, when you say no, you are not simply closing a door, you are pointing toward the direction of your values. You are telling the world, and yourself, who you are. Let's imagine a simple example. A friend asks you to join them for late night drinking, but you say no. To some, it may seem like you are rejecting fun. But in truth, your no reflects something deeper. Maybe it reflects your value of health. Maybe it reflects your need for rest. Maybe it reflects your commitment to rise early and work on your craft. Whatever the reason, your no is not just about the invitation. It is about the value you are protecting. The same is true in every area of life. When you say no to gossip, you are saying yes to integrity. When you say no to overwork, you are saying yes to balance. When you say no to shallow approval, you are saying yes to authenticity. Each no is like a compass pointing toward what truly matters. But here's the challenge. Many people say yes without thinking because they are afraid of how their no will be received. They don't want to disappoint. They don't want to create conflict. And so they trade their values for temporary peace. But the price of that trade is heavy. Every yes that betrays your values erodes your sense of self. It leaves you feeling fragmented, restless, and unanchored. Socrates would call this a form of ignorance. Not ignorance in the sense of not knowing facts, but ignorance of the soul, not knowing what you truly value, not examining the principles that guide your life. His famous call to know the self was, in part, a call to clarity of values. Because once you know your values, your no becomes powerful. It is no longer a weapon of rejection, but a shield of integrity. Think about the life of Socrates himself. He said no to comfort when he could have chosen it. He said no to abandoning his mission, even when threatened with death. He said no to fleeing Athens, though friends offered him escape. Why? Because each of those no's was a mirror of his values. His devotion to truth, his obedience to what he called the voice of his conscience, and his commitment to philosophy above survival. His no's were not stubbornness. They were the purest reflection of what he held sacred. This is why the word no, when spoken with clarity, carries weight. People may not like it, but they will respect it. Because deep down, they recognize that a principled no is rare. In a world where everyone is pulled by fear and approval, the person who can say no with integrity shines like a lighthouse in the fog. But here is the question for you. Do you know what your no reveals? Do you know what values you are protecting? Or are your yeses and nos scattered, inconsistent, dictated by mood or pressure? If you want your no to be powerful, It must come from reflection. It must be rooted in what you truly value. Take a moment and think. What matters most to you? Is it health? Is it family? Is it learning? Is it peace of mind? Is it creativity? Whatever your values are, they should guide your no. Otherwise, you will drift through life saying yes to things that drain you and saying no to things that could have nourished you. For example, if you value growth, then you may need to say no to endless comfort. If you value peace, you may need to say no to unnecessary arguments. If you value wisdom, you may need to say no to shallow distractions. Each no is a way of guarding the treasure of your values, and the beauty is this: when you live in alignment with your values, your no becomes easier. It stops being a source of guilt and starts being a source of clarity. You don't feel selfish because you know your no is not random. It is rooted. It is consistent. It is part of a larger picture of who you are becoming. Socrates' life teaches us that no is not about rejecting others. It is about affirming yourself. It is about living a life that reflects what you truly care about. His courage to say no to compromise was not arrogance. It was wisdom. It was the recognition that the soul must be guarded more carefully than the body, that values must be protected more fiercely than reputation. So the next time you face a choice, pause and ask, what does my yes reveal? What does my no reveal? Which one reflects the values I want to live by? And if your no aligns with your deepest principles, then speak it without fear, because that no is not a rejection, it is a mirror of what you stand for, a mirror of who you are. And here lies the paradox. When you live by such no's, you actually create a deeper yes, a yes to a life that is consistent, meaningful, and free, a yes to integrity, a yes to living with the kind of strength that Socrates embodied, the kind of strength that still inspires us thousands of years later. So remember this: your no is never empty. It is always pointing somewhere. Make sure it points toward your values, not away from them. Because in the end, the life you build is not the sum of your yeses. It is the sum of the boundaries you draw, the values you protect, and the no's that keep your soul aligned with truth. Wisdom is not something that arrives all at once. It is not a gift that falls from the sky or a prize handed out to the lucky few. Wisdom is built slowly, through choices, through discipline, through the quiet shaping of the soul over time. And one of the most overlooked disciplines in that journey is the discipline of saying no. Think about the countless decisions you face each day. Most of them look small. An invitation here, a request there, an impulse to indulge, a chance to stay distracted. On the surface, these choices seem harmless. But each yes or no shapes you in ways you do not see. The person who says yes to every impulse becomes restless, unfocused, scattered. The person who learns to say no with discipline becomes clear, steady, wise. Socrates lived by this principle. For him, wisdom was not about gathering endless information, but about learning what to reject. He often said that the beginning of wisdom is the recognition of ignorance, the understanding that you do not need to chase everything. That awareness creates space, and into that space discipline enters. The discipline to say no to what does not matter, so the soul can focus on what does. Consider how easy it is to get lost in the noise of life. Every day, the world presents you with distractions, endless news, countless opinions, trivial conflicts, the constant temptation to prove yourself. If you say yes to all of it, your mind is pulled in 100 directions. You become like a ship tossed in a storm, never steady, always reacting. But if you discipline yourself to say no, to guard your attention, then wisdom begins to take root. You see more clearly, you think more deeply, you begin to distinguish between what is urgent and what is truly important. Discipline in saying no is not only about protecting time, it is also about protecting the soul. When you say no to envy, you protect gratitude. When you say no to anger, you protect peace. When you say no to shallow praise, you protect authenticity. Each no is like a gate that shields the inner garden of your mind. Without that gate, weeds invade. With that gate, wisdom has room to grow. Socrates himself practiced this discipline in remarkable ways. He said no to flattery, even when it could have gained him favor with the powerful. He said no to wealth, even when it could have made his life easier. He said no to abandoning his philosophy, even when the price was death. These were not easy no's. They required courage. They required the discipline to hold firm when others wavered. But it was precisely this discipline that made him wise. And here is the lesson for us: wisdom is not about always knowing what to say yes to. It is about learning what to say no to. Every no becomes a statement of values. Every no clears away what is false so that truth can emerge. Without the discipline of no, wisdom drowns in noise. With the discipline of no, wisdom rises like a clear voice in the silence. This discipline also builds strength over time. At first, saying no feels uncomfortable. You worry about disappointing others. You fear missing out. You second-guess yourself. But the more you practice, the stronger you become. Each disciplined no makes the next one easier. Slowly, you build a habit of clarity, and that habit becomes wisdom. Think of it like a sculptor working with stone. The sculptor does not create a statue by adding more material. He creates it by removing, by saying no to what does not belong. Every strike of the hammer is a no to excess, and through those no's, beauty is revealed. Wisdom works the same way. It is revealed not by endless additions, but by disciplined refusals. By saying no to what is unworthy, you reveal the form of your truest self. And notice how this kind of discipline actually expands freedom. Without boundaries, without no's, life becomes heavy, cluttered, chaotic. But when you discipline yourself to reject what is shallow, you find space for depth. When you say no to endless obligations, you discover time for reflection. When you say no to constant stimulation, you uncover silence. And in that silence, wisdom speaks. Modern life makes this discipline even more urgent. Technology pulls at us with endless requests for attention. Social expectations tell us to say yes to more, to always be available, to never rest. But wisdom demands the opposite. It demands that we reclaim our no, that we use it as a tool of self-mastery, that we remember that every no is not just a rejection but a preservation of something greater. Our focus, our integrity, our peace. And here is a thought worth holding: when you practice the discipline of saying no, you not only shape your own life, you teach others by example. People notice when you live with boundaries. They may not always like it, but they respect it. They may even feel inspired to protect their own lives more carefully. Your no can become a quiet form of teaching, just as Socrates' no became a lesson that still echoes thousands of years later. So let us return to the beginning. Wisdom is not given. It is built, and one of the tools that builds it is the simple, difficult, powerful word no. A no to distractions. A no to impulses. A no to everything that pulls you away from the examined life. Socrates showed us that discipline in saying no is not about harshness. It is about care. It is about caring enough for the soul to guard it from harm. It is about caring enough for truth to reject what is false. It is about caring enough for life to live it with intention, not with endless reaction. And so, when you face your next decision, remember this: the wisdom you long for does not only come from the yeses you choose, it also comes from the discipline of your no's. Guard them. Honor them. Practice them. Because each no, spoken with courage and discipline, is a step toward wisdom. Saying no is also an act of freedom from external pressure. Socrates lived in a city full of noise, opinions, and the expectations of others. Athens was a society where public image mattered deeply, where every man was judged on how he spoke, acted, and conformed. Yet Socrates stood apart because he was not enslaved to the crowd. When he refused unjust orders, when he questioned false claims, and when he accepted his trial without bending, he showed that true strength lies not in pleasing others, but in being free from their grip. To say no to pressure is to reclaim one's inner sovereignty. Many of us give in not because we believe something is right, but because we are afraid of standing alone. Socrates teaches that solitude with integrity is far more valuable than company in compromise. Another layer to the art of saying no is patience. Socrates demonstrated that rushing to agree, rushing to please, or rushing to act is often the downfall of wisdom. A considered refusal holds more dignity than a hasty yes. In daily life, this means learning to pause before responding, to reflect before committing. The strongest discipline comes not from reacting in the moment, but from deliberately choosing in alignment with our values. Saying no, then, is not always loud or dramatic. It is often quiet, calm, and steady, a simple, "I will not," that resists urgency and preserves dignity. Socrates also reveals that saying no requires courage. When he was brought before the court of Athens, accused of corrupting the youth and dishonoring the gods, he was offered chances to soften his words, to retract his teachings, or even to flee into exile. Yet he said no to all of these because he believed truth mattered more than safety. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to stand firm despite fear. To say no when everything pushes you toward yes is to embrace the same bravery that Socrates embodied. He showed us that the cost of integrity may be high, but the cost of surrendering it is far higher. There is also a connection between saying no and simplicity. Socrates lived simply, without luxury or excess. He said no to materialism, no to the endless chase for wealth, and no to the distractions that consumed his fellow Athenians. This simplicity gave him clarity of mind and strength of spirit. Modern life tempts us with constant consumption, endless upgrades, and the idea that more is always better. Yet by saying no to unnecessary wants, we reclaim time, focus, and peace. Socrates reminds us that wisdom grows best in a life uncluttered by noise and greed. Discipline, then, is not only about resisting external demands, but also about quieting inner cravings. Finally, saying no is an affirmation of what truly matters. Every refusal is also a yes to something else. When Socrates said no to abandoning philosophy, he was saying yes to truth. When he said no to saving his life through dishonor, he was saying yes to virtue. This perspective transforms the act of refusal into a positive commitment. It is not simply rejection, but redirection toward what is meaningful. In our own lives, this means understanding that every time we decline something that distracts us, drains us, or compromises us, we are actually choosing the higher path, the path of integrity, focus, and peace. The art of saying no, as taught by Socrates, is therefore not about stubbornness or isolation. It is about discipline, courage, freedom, and clarity. It is the ability to resist when resistance is needed, to choose integrity over conformity, and to live aligned with deeper values. In a world full of noise and demands, his lesson is timeless. To master the art of saying no is to master oneself. Socrates reminds us that a strong life is not built on the number of things we say yes to, but on the wisdom to refuse what does not serve the soul.